On a quiet evening in a golden-lit restaurant, a little girl suddenly points toward the window, her voice trembling. "Dad, that woman looks just like Mommy." The father turns, heart pounding, only to see the face he buried 2 years ago, alive, broken, and living on the streets. What follows is a heart-gripping journey of love, loss and redemption, a story of a billionaire who dares to chase a ghost, a daughter who refuses to stop believing, and a woman fighting to remember who she truly is. Watch till the end to feel the truth unfold, the secret, the heartbreak and the miracle reunion that no one saw coming. If stories about hope, family, and second chances touch your heart, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, because every story we tell will make you believe again. Rain whispered against the restaurant windows, a soft Boston drizzle that turned the streetlights into molten halos. Inside, the warmth smelled of garlic and baked bread. Andrew Sloane stirred his untouched espresso, eyes fixed on nothing, pretending to listen as his 8-year-old daughter hummed along with the soft jazz drifting from the speakers. Her small fingers were tracing hearts on the fogged glass, the kind of gesture that once would have drawn a laugh from his late wife. Now it only tightened something behind his ribs. Chloe's voice broke the quiet. "Daddy, that lady looks like Mom." Andrew blinked, unsure he'd heard her right. The room shrank around the sound of plates clinking, the waiter's laughter, the rain. She was pointing toward the alley beyond the restaurant's awning. A figure huddled beneath the overhang, soaked hair plastered to her face, a thin coat wrapped around her like paper. At first it was just pity that pulled him to look closer, until the woman turned slightly toward the light. The scar above her left eyebrow caught the glow, a thin white crescent he'd kissed 100 times before. The spoon slipped from his hand and hit the saucer with a sound too loud for the small table. He didn't breathe. His pulse filled his ears until all he could hear was the thud of it. Chloe tugged at his sleeve. "It's her, Daddy." He told himself it wasn't possible. The helicopter crash, the funeral, the endless forms, the psychologist's gentle phrases, acceptance, healing, closure. He'd built his life on the certainty that Elena was gone. Yet outside, in the blue rain of a Boston afternoon, a woman with his wife's face was staring back through the blur of traffic like someone who had been waiting for him to notice. He pushed back his chair. The legs scraped on tile. The waiter called after him, but Andrew was already moving, his shoes splashing through shallow puddles, heart hammering as though each beat might erase her from sight if he faltered. The alley smelled of wet cardboard and gasoline. She stood at the far end, framed by brick walls the color of old blood. "Elena?" The word cracked in his throat, half plea, half warning to himself. The woman flinched. She turned fully into the light, and for an instant her eyes, blue-green trembling, met his. Confusion, fear, recognition, then flight. She ran, bare feet slapping against the pavement, vanishing into the labyrinth of rain and dumpsters before he could move. "Wait!" His voice echoed uselessly down the narrow passage. He reached the corner just in time to see an empty street, only the smear of footprints dissolving in water. Chloe came running, clutching his coat. "Where'd she go?" Her voice trembled with both wonder and fear. Andrew stood still, drenched, staring into the rain. His mind told him he'd chased a ghost, a stranger who happened to share the curve of a jaw, a scar, but his body remembered her scent, the way she used to look back over her shoulder exactly like that. He knelt, gripping his daughter's hands to still their shaking. "It's probably someone who just looks like her," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Chloe only stared up, eyes full of certainty, far too old for 8 years. When they walked back to the car, he found himself glancing behind every corner, hoping for another glimpse. And when the wipers cleared the windshield, he saw a single plastic grocery bag half buried near the alley drain. Inside, through the fogged glass, something white gleamed. A torn hospital wristband stamped with the name Sarah. He didn't drive away. The rain thickened, the world shrinking to the circle of light from the street lamp. In that glow, the name burned in his vision until it blurred. "Sarah," he whispered, tasting disbelief and hope all tangled together. Then softer, as though the rain itself might answer, "Elena." The thunder rolled low across the Charles, and for the first time in 2 years, he felt the pulse of a promise waking inside him, something he was terrified to believe. The night had deepened by the time Andrew guided his car through the slick streets, the windshield wipers thudding in a steady rhythm. His daughter sat in the back seat, her head resting against the glass, eyes wide open even though bedtime had long passed. The silence between them was thick, the kind that feels like holding one's breath for too long. Every corner they passed looked the same, shimmering puddles, red taillights, blurred figures hurrying under umbrellas. But to Andrew, every shadow was her. Every face under a street lamp could have been Elena. When he finally parked near the alley again, the rain had eased into a mist. The place was empty now, just the glisten of wet bricks and the faint smell of smoke drifting from a vent. He stepped out, ignoring the chill seeping through his shirt. His shoes splashed in shallow water as he crouched near the spot where she had stood. Only a damp patch of flattened cardboard remained in the memory of her eyes. Chloe climbed out quietly and came to his side. She carried the small flashlight from the glove compartment, its beam slicing through the fog. She was right there, she whispered, pointing. I know, Andrew said softly. He scanned the corners, the rusted dumpster, the cracked pipes, the fire escape leading up into the dark. His rational mind fought to reassert control. People could resemble each other. The scar could be coincidence. Grief could play tricks, but the certainty in his daughter's voice gnawed at him. Children didn't imagine scars. They searched until the mist thickened into a curtain. On the edge of the alley, near a drain, he spotted a torn grocery bag half-soaked in rainwater. He lifted it out carefully, the plastic cold and heavy in his hands. Inside were a few items. A crumpled granola bar wrapper, a folded napkin, and that hospital wristband he'd glimpsed before. The letters were faded, but the name, Sarah, was clear. Beneath it, a patient number and the name of a clinic he didn't recognize. Chloe leaned closer, her breath fogging the plastic. Maybe that's her new name, she said. Maybe she forgot. Andrew swallowed hard. He wanted to tell her that people didn't just forget who they were, that this was a mistake, a cruel coincidence, but the words wouldn't come. He slipped the wristband into his pocket and guided her back toward the car. They drove home in near silence. Every few minutes, Chloe would turn her head and whisper, "It was Mom." Each time, he answered with something neutral, "We don't know yet, or we'll see tomorrow," because a part of him, fragile and frightened, wanted to believe her. At home, he tucked her into bed. She refused to let go of the drawing she had made earlier that evening, a picture of their family, 3 stick figures holding hands under a sun. One corner of the paper was smudged by rain. "If we find her," she murmured, half asleep, "we can give this to her." Andrew sat on the edge of the bed, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Sleep, sweetheart," he whispered. But when she closed her eyes, he didn't move. He stayed there until her breathing deepened, until the clock crept past midnight. In his study downstairs, he poured himself a glass of scotch, but didn't drink it. The wristband lay on the desk beside the photo from their last vacation. His hand hovered over the phone, the urge to call the police warring with something more cautious. If he was wrong, they'd think he'd lost his mind. If he was right, he didn't even know what that meant. He typed the clinic name into his laptop. The screen glowed pale blue as the search loaded. St. Bridget's Outreach Center, emergency care for the homeless. His heart kicked once, hard. The clock struck 1. He stood, pulled on his coat, and checked on Chloe one last time. She was dreaming, her small hand clutching the paper family tight. Back in the car, the city had quieted. The rain had stopped completely now, and the streets gleamed like black glass. He parked near the alley again, stepping out into the cold air, scanning the rooftops, the shadows, listening for any sound. Nothing but the hum of distant traffic and a lone siren somewhere far away. He whispered into the night, not sure whom he was speaking to. "If you're her, if you're Elena,
I'll find you.
I'll bring you home." From the far end of the alley, a rusted fire escape creaked softly in the wind. A shadow shifted just out of sight. Andrew froze, breath caught in his chest. For a fleeting heartbeat, he could swear he saw her silhouette moving, slowly, carefully, watching him from above. Then it was gone again, leaving only the faint metallic echo and the certainty that he was no longer chasing a memory. He was chasing the truth. The next morning arrived gray and brittle, the kind of Boston dawn that carried the taste of iron in the air. Andrew sat at the kitchen table, the smell of coffee filling the silence while Chloe buttered her toast in small, slow circles. Neither spoke much. She wore her school sweater, her hair tied neatly in the same braid her mother used to do, and every glance she gave him carried the same unspoken question. He couldn't send her to school. Not today. Not when the image of that scar still throbbed behind his eyes like a pulse he couldn't silence. By noon, he was back on Hanover Street, dressed down in a wool coat and cap, pretending to read the paper on a park bench across from the alley. Pigeons pecked at crumbs near his shoes, and every few minutes his gaze flicked to the corner where he'd first seen her. Chloe sat beside him, swinging her legs, clutching a paper bag that smelled of peanut butter sandwiches. They'd made a plan, as if the woman's return could be coaxed by patience alone. The city moved around them, indifferent. Street musicians played near the bakery. Office workers laughed over coffee cups. The world went on, but Andrew's heartbeat stayed tuned to one frequency: the scrape of footsteps, the rustle of fabric, anything that might belong to her. Hours passed. Then near the alley mouth, a shape appeared. She emerged slowly, the same coat wrapped tight, hair tangled beneath a faded scarf. The sight of her hit him like a wave. This time he didn't move. He stayed seated, letting Chloe be the first to act. The little girl stood, lifted the brown paper bag, and crossed the street without hesitation. Andrew wanted to stop her, to protect her, but something about the small bravery in her stride held him still. Chloe stopped a few feet away from the woman. "Hi," she said softly, holding out the bag. "It's turkey and cheese. I made it." The woman blinked as if the voice reached through fog. Her hands trembled when she accepted the bag, eyes darting from Chloe to the man waiting on the bench. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice, it was Elena's pitch, the same lilting rhythm but hollowed out, cautious. Chloe smiled like it was the most normal thing in the world. "You're welcome." She lingered, studying the woman's face. Then she added, "You look like someone we know." The woman's lips pressed together. "People say that," she murmured, backing a step into the shadow. Andrew rose, slow, careful. He didn't want to startle her. "We don't mean any harm," he said. We thought maybe you needed help." Her gaze darted again, tracing exits, measuring risk. She didn't run this time. Instead, she whispered a single name. "Sarah." It took him a second to realize she was introducing herself. Sarah, the name on the wristband. He nodded gently as though it were a fragile truth. "All right, Sarah, my name's Andrew. And this is Chloe." The rain began again, light at first, misting over her shoulders. She looked upward as if the weather itself hurt to remember. "I have to go," she said quickly. Chloe's voice broke. "Wait, can we see you again?" The woman hesitated, eyes softening. "Maybe," she whispered. Then, almost to herself, "You shouldn't be kind to strangers." Andrew stepped closer. "We don't believe in strangers," he said. But she was already backing away, pulling the coat tighter, vanishing once more into the curve of the alley. When she was gone, Chloe's eyes filled. "She's scared," she said. "I know," Andrew replied. He looked down at the bench where the woman had stood. She'd left the sandwich bag behind, still unopened, but next to it, half hidden under a piece of cardboard, was a seashell, small, white, spiraled, perfectly clean. It looked impossibly out of place in a city alley. Chloe gasped. "That's Mom's shell. The one from Cape May." Andrew turned it over in his hand. The same tiny crack on the edge, the same smoothness from years of being carried in a pocket. He remembered the day she'd found it, how she'd said it sounded like the ocean never really left you if you listened close enough. Now it hummed faintly in his palm, or maybe it was just the echo of his heartbeat. "Tomorrow," he said quietly. "We'll come back tomorrow." They walked home through the drizzle, the shell clenched in his fist like a promise. Each step left a darker mark on the sidewalk, and though the rain washed them away quickly, he felt the pull of something larger, like fate had begun to trace a path of its own. That night, long after Chloe had fallen asleep, Andrew placed the seashell on the windowsill beside his late wife's photograph. He stared at both, caught between belief and reason, between grief and something dangerously close to hope. Outside, the city lights shimmered like tears on glass, and somewhere in the distance a lone figure moved beneath the rain, clutching the same brown paper bag she had once refused. The rain came heavier the next day, a steady rhythm that blurred the city's edges into watercolor. Andrew sat in his car across the street, windshield fogging from his breath as he watched the alley where she had vanished. Chloe leaned forward in the passenger seat, chin on her knees, eyes locked on the same dark corner. Between them, a brown paper bag waited on the dashboard. Another sandwich, an apple, a thermos of hot tea this time. Patience had become their ritual. Hours passed before movement broke the monotony. The same figure appeared at the edge of the alley, her coat darker from the damp, her shoulders hunched as if the weight of the sky rested on them. She looked thinner than before. The sight pulled something deep in Andrew's chest, a mix of joy and sorrow so tangled he couldn't breathe. "Dad?" Chloe whispered. "It's her." He nodded, forcing calm. "Stay here, sweetheart." He stepped out into the rain, slow and deliberate, careful not to startle her. She saw him almost immediately, her gaze sharp, defensive. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Only the sound of water dripping from the fire escape above filled the silence. "I brought something for you," he said, raising the bag. His voice trembled, barely louder than the rain. "Just tea and food." Her eyes flicked from the bag to his face, and he saw something flicker there. Recognition, then fear. She stepped forward, hesitated, then reached out and took the bag. Their fingers brushed, and he felt her recoil like the contact burned. "Thank you," she murmured. The sound of her voice, soft, musical, trembling, pulled him back to another life. The way she'd once said goodnight, the way she'd sung their daughter to sleep. "I wanted to show you something," he said, slowly. He pulled a photograph from his coat pocket, shielding it from the rain with his palm. It was faded now, corners frayed, a picture taken 3 summers ago on a beach in Cape May. Elena laughing with Chloe on her shoulders, the ocean curling behind them in soft blue waves. Her eyes dropped to the photo. The world seemed to still around her. She reached out, fingertips hovering above the image without touching it. Her hand shook as though the air itself were charged. "Do you see?" Andrew said gently. That's you, isn't it?" She blinked, her lips parting but no sound coming out. For a moment he thought she might deny it. Then she whispered, "I don't know." Her gaze drifted to the scar above her brow, reflected faintly in the window behind him. "I don't remember." "Maybe you don't have to remember all at once," he said. "Maybe it'll come back slowly." Her eyes lifted to his. There was confusion, terror, and something else. A longing she didn't dare believe in. "I have dreams sometimes," she said, voice fragile. "Of water. Of falling. Someone calling my name. Elena," he whispered, unable to stop himself. At the sound, she flinched, tears pooling beneath her lashes. She pressed her palms to her temples as if the name itself hurt. "Please," she breathed, shaking her head. I can't be her." Chloe had slipped out of the car without him noticing. She stood now a few feet behind, small and still, holding the seashell in both hands. "You dropped this," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the rain. The woman turned. Her eyes fell on the shell. She froze. Her breath caught audibly, a sharp intake of recognition. She stepped forward as if drawn by a thread and took it gently from Chloe's palm. Her thumb traced the crack along its curve, and for a moment her face broke. Pain and wonder mingled until she looked almost like the woman they had lost. Andrew's heart hammered. "You remember that?" "I remember." The sound, she whispered. She lifted the shell to her ear. Rain pattered around them, and yet she smiled faintly. "The ocean." Chloe smiled too, tears wet on her cheeks. "That's Mommy's," she said simply. The woman's smile faltered. She stepped back, clutching the shell to her chest. "I'm sorry," she said, voice breaking. "I'm not her. I can't be." She turned, retreating down the alley, her footsteps splashing through puddles. Andrew called after her. "Please wait." She didn't. She vanished again, leaving only the echo of her breath and the photo trembling in his hand. Chloe pressed her face into his coat, sobbing quietly. He knelt, wrapping his arms around her, the rain soaking them both. "She's scared," he said, his voice thick. "That's all?" "She's scared." From across the street, an engine turned over. Andrew looked up sharply, catching the glare of headlights from a black sedan idling at the curb. The driver watched them for a long moment before pulling away slowly, tires hissing against the wet asphalt. He stood there long after the car disappeared, the rain washing the street clean. Somewhere deep inside he felt a shift, not hope exactly, but certainty. This wasn't over. Whoever she was, wherever she had been, the woman with the scar was connected to them, and tomorrow he would find a way to bring her home. Morning arrived with a dull sky and the smell of rain still clinging to the air. The city outside his windows was half awake, cars hissing on wet pavement, distant horns echoing off buildings. Andrew stood in the doorway of the guest room, his reflection ghosting across the open door. staring at the neatly made bed he had prepared the night before. Fresh sheets, folded towels, a small vase of white daisies on the bedside table. It looked like a space waiting for someone who might never come. Chloe padded in behind him, hair still messy from sleep, hugging her stuffed fox. "Do you think she'll come today?" she asked, voice heavy with hope and worry mixed together. Andrew's gaze didn't leave the bed. "I don't know," he said softly. "But if she does, she'll have a place here." He had called in favors that morning, quietly, carefully. A private nurse he trusted, Susan Harper, who'd once helped him after the accident. A trauma therapist named Dr. Lawrence, who specialized in memory loss and identity confusion. Both had agreed to come to the house later that day, just in case. He couldn't risk losing her again. Not when she was so close, not when he'd seen the flicker of recognition in her eyes yesterday. By noon, the rain had faded into a pale drizzle. They sat again by the bench near Hanover Street. The air smelled of wet stone and roasted coffee from the cafe nearby. Chloe clutched the paper bag tighter than ever. This time it wasn't just a sandwich. Inside were cookies she had baked herself that morning, small misshapen stars glazed with sugar. "Mom's favorite," she'd said with a grin that nearly broke him. Hours passed before the familiar figure appeared at the far end of the alley, moving slower than before. Her coat clung to her shoulders, her face thinner in the gray light. She looked wary but curious. Andrew stood first, raising a hand. "It's all right," he said gently. "No tricks, just lunch." She hesitated, watching him from the edge of the curb. "Why do you keep coming back?" "Because I think you need someone," he answered. "And maybe we do too." Chloe stepped forward before he could stop her, opening the paper bag and holding out one of the small sugar cookies. "You dropped your shell yesterday," she said quietly. "I cleaned it for you." The woman's eyes softened. She took the cookie with trembling fingers, studying it as though afraid it might vanish. Then she smiled, a fleeting, uncertain curve of her lips, and bit into it. The moment she did, she froze. Her eyes widened, pupils dilating as if the taste had pulled something out of the dark. "Cinnamon," she whispered. "And honey," Chloe beamed. "Mom's recipe," the woman's breath caught. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. Then she whispered, barely audible, "That kitchen by the window. The sunlight on the counter." Her fingers pressed to her temple. "I can see it. I can smell it." Andrew's chest tightened. "You remember?" She looked up at him, tears already welling in her eyes. "I don't know. I see flashes. A child's laughter. A voice telling me something about stars." Chloe's small voice trembled. "That was you. You used to say, 'Dream of the stars, my little one.' Every night." The woman staggered back, overwhelmed, clutching the side of the wall for balance. No, I can't. I shouldn't be here." Andrew took a step forward, stopping just short of her reach. "You don't have to decide anything today," he said softly. "But if you want a place to rest, to feel safe, there's a room waiting. No questions. No pressure." The door locks from the inside. Her eyes searched his face, unsure whether to trust the calm in his tone. Then slowly she nodded once. "Just for tonight," she whispered. "And then I go." Chloe exhaled in a shiver of relief and reached for her hand. The woman flinched, then hesitantly let the small fingers curl around hers. They drove home through the drizzle, the wipers clicking softly. She sat in the back seat, staring out the window, one hand still wrapped around the seashell. Every now and then her eyes flicked to the reflection of Chloe's hair in the glass, as though searching for something familiar. When they reached the house, she paused in the doorway, scanning the walls, the furniture, the scent of the place. Her breath hitched faintly. "It smells like lavender and cinnamon," Chloe finished for her, smiling. The woman's throat worked, but no words came. Susan, the nurse, met them in the hallway with quiet kindness, helping her upstairs. "Your space," she said, gesturing to the guest room. "Your rules. No one enters unless you ask." The woman nodded faintly and stepped inside, placing the shell on the nightstand. Andrew lingered by the door, heart pounding, wanting to say something but not daring to break the fragile peace. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. "What if I never remember?" He looked back, eyes gentle but certain. "Then we start from here." She didn't answer, but when the door closed softly behind him, he could still hear the faint sound of her breathing, steady, alive, human, and it was the most beautiful sound he'd heard in 2 years. The first night in the house was wrapped in uneasy quiet. The rain had stopped. leaving the air heavy and clean, the windows glistening with faint reflections of streetlights outside. The woman who called herself Sarah sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room, fingers twisting the edge of the blanket, as if anchoring herself to something solid. The room smelled faintly of lavender, the same scent that lingered in her scattered dreams, and she couldn't tell if that made her feel comforted or suffocated. Down the hall, a nightlight cast a soft glow beneath a child's door. She could hear distant laughter from some recorded show that Andrew must have left on in the living room. A low hum meant to fill the silence. Everything here felt too gentle, too kind. It unsettled her. When she finally lay down, the pillow felt wrong, too soft, too familiar. She turned onto her side, pressing her face against it, eyes wide open in the dark. The sound came first, metal twisting, a low mechanical groan that didn't belong in this house. Then came the water, cold and rising. Her breath hitched, chest tightening as if the weight of the ocean itself pressed on her. She was in the helicopter again. She could smell fuel, taste salt, feel the violent shaking of the craft as alarms wailed. Hands reached for her, someone shouting her name, Elena. Then a flash of white light and the scream of tearing metal. She couldn't breathe. The world tilted, water bursting through the windows, her lungs burning as she tried to call out. But only bubbles came. She kicked, reached, then the blackness swallowed everything. Sarah, Elena, bolted upright in the dark, gasping, drenched in sweat. The room around her spun. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, struggling to remember where she was. Her throat burned, and when she tried to cry out, only a broken whimper escaped. A knock came at the door. "Sarah?" Andrew's voice was soft, cautious. "Are you all right?" She couldn't answer. He opened the door just enough for the dim hallway light to spill across the floor. He saw her shaking and moved closer, careful not to touch her. "You're safe," he said quietly. "You're here, not there. Breathe with me, okay?" He sat on the edge of the bed, not too near, his voice steady and low as he guided her through slow breaths. In and out. "You're all right." His hand rested on the nightstand near her, open but not reaching. The patience in his eyes steadied her more than the words. Her breathing began to ease, the nightmare fading like mist. Tears slid down her cheeks without her noticing. "I saw the water again," she whispered. And the noise. Metal, screaming. "I was falling." Andrew nodded slowly. "You remember something real," he said. "You survived." She looked at him then, confusion mingling with fear. "You said that name. Earlier, Elena. Why do you keep calling me that?" He swallowed hard. The question hung between them, too heavy for the small room. "Because that's who you are," he said finally. "That's who we lost." Her eyes shimmered, uncertainty trembling in her voice. "I don't know who I am. I only know it feels like someone's waiting for me to remember." He wanted to reach out, to take her hand, but he didn't. "Then remember slowly," he said. "No one's rushing you. You're safe here, I promise." Outside, the wind rattled the windows lightly, and for a moment she closed her eyes, letting the sound blend with his calm voice. Something deep inside her recognized it. The steadiness, the warmth, the familiar rhythm of safety. She hadn't felt that in years, maybe lifetimes. Down the hall, Chloe stirred from a dream and appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Is she okay?" Andrew turned, motioning gently for her to stay. "She just had a bad dream," he said softly. The woman looked at the little girl silhouetted in the light. Her heart clenched with a strange ache. The child's eyes were wide and worried, too familiar, too much like the pair she saw in her own fragmented dreams. Chloe stepped closer, clutching a small stuffed fox. "Mom used to have bad dreams too," she whispered. "Dad says they're like storms. They pass if someone stays with you." Something in that sentence broke the last of her restraint. Tears spilled freely now, silent and raw. She nodded faintly, unable to speak, and Chloe placed the stuffed fox on her lap before padding back toward her room. When the hallway grew quiet again, Andrew rose slowly. "Try to sleep," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "We'll talk in the morning." "You're not alone." She didn't answer. He turned off the light and closed the door halfway. For a long time, she sat in the dark, clutching the small fox to her chest, listening to the faint sounds of a home that wasn't yet hers but somehow felt like one she'd lost. The air smelled faintly of lavender and rain, and beneath her heartbeat she could still hear the echo of his words. "You survived." When she finally lay back down, her breathing was steady. The nightmare was gone, but its memory remained sharp and bright like a blade under her ribs, and somewhere deep within that darkness a single word rose clear and certain through the fog of her mind. Elena. Morning sunlight crept softly through the curtains, painting thin gold lines across the guest room. The air was still, except for the faint rustle of leaves outside and the slow rhythm of breathing. The woman, Sarah or maybe Elena, opened her eyes to warmth instead of fear for the first time in years. The dream had left traces in her mind, the metallic scream of the helicopter fading like an echo down a long tunnel. She sat up slowly, brushing her damp hair from her face. On the nightstand, someone had placed a small tray, a cup of tea, toast with honey, and a folded note that read, "Good morning. Take your time. Andrew." She stared at the handwriting for a long moment. The looping letters tugged at something buried deep in her chest. It was familiar, comforting, and frightening all at once. She brought the cup to her lips, the faint smell of lavender rising with the steam. The same scent from her dream, the same one from the house that haunted her half-remembered flashes. Outside, the house hummed with quiet life. She could hear the faint clatter of dishes downstairs and the distant laughter of a child, Chloe. The name had become an anchor in her thoughts, soft and luminous. She hadn't known her long, but the girl's voice felt like a song she already knew the words to. When she finally left the room, she moved like a ghost, hesitant, testing each step. The walls were lined with photos, family vacations, birthdays, sunlight, and smiles frozen in time. Her gaze lingered on one image, Andrew holding a laughing Chloe, their arms around a woman whose face looked impossibly like hers. The same smile, the same eyes, her hand lifted toward the frame, trembling. The sound of the photoglass beneath her fingertips brought a sudden rush of memory, laughter, camera flashes, a breeze carrying the smell of salt water. For a heartbeat, she was there again, standing on that beach, sunlight in her hair. Then it was gone. "Good morning." Andrew's voice broke the spell. He stood in the doorway of the living room wearing a sweater and a tired smile. His eyes searched hers gently, not with pity, but with patience. "Morning," she murmured. Chloe popped her head out from behind the couch. "You're awake," she said brightly, holding up a small music box. "I wanted to show you something." The little girl wound the tiny key and a soft melody filled the air, a delicate tune that made the woman's breath catch. The notes shimmered like light on water. Her vision blurred. She knew this song. Not from the last few days, not from the shelter she barely remembered, but from before. She had played it herself, sitting on a wooden floor watching Chloe twirl in mismatched socks. Her hand lifted to her mouth, trembling. "That song?" Chloe looked up at her. "Mom used to play it when I was scared," she said. "Do you like it?" Something inside her cracked open. A flash, a kitchen glowing in morning light. Cinnamon in the air, a child spinning while she laughed. She stumbled back, clutching the edge of the couch as the tears came. I can see it," she whispered. "I can see her. The kitchen. The smell. The window open." She said. Andrew moved closer but kept his distance, voice steady. "What did she say?" The woman closed her eyes, her voice shaking. She said, "Even when you're afraid, listen to the music, it will take you home." Chloe gasped softly, covering her mouth. "That's what you said, Mommy." The room froze. The word hung there, fragile as glass. Andrew's breath caught and his eyes glistened. The woman turned to him, eyes wide, face pale. "I didn't mean—" He stepped forward then, slowly, carefully. "It's all right," he said. "You don't have to force it. The memories come how they want to." Her hand shook. "But what if they're wrong? What if I'm just stealing her life?" "You can't steal what's already yours," Andrew said quietly. Silence settled between them. Outside, sunlight filtered through the rain-damp glass, spilling golden patterns across the floor. Chloe reached up and took the woman's hand. "You can play the music again if you forget," she said softly. Something eased in her chest. She sank down to her knees beside the girl, pulling her into a hesitant embrace. The scent of the child's hair, vanilla shampoo and rain, brought another flood of warmth that filled the hollow places inside her. She didn't remember everything, but this moment felt real. It felt right. Later, as afternoon light dimmed, she sat by the window holding the music box. Its melody played faintly, each note carrying pieces of a life she was still stitching back together. From the kitchen came the scent of cinnamon again. Andrew baking cookies with Chloe, their laughter low and human. For the first time in 2 years, the house sounded alive. And though she couldn't yet claim the memories that flickered through her mind, she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she belonged somewhere inside them. The sky over Boston was pale gray, heavy with the promise of another rainstorm. Inside the house, warmth fought against the chill, the scent of coffee, faint cinnamon, and the quiet shuffle of morning life. Andrew sat at the kitchen table, tapping his fingers against a folded newspaper he wasn't reading. Across from him, Chloe was bent over her homework, humming under her breath, her legs swinging beneath the chair. The soft sound of her voice reminded him of the woman upstairs, and how silence had begun to lift since she came back. He heard movement on the stairs, slow, careful steps, and his chest tightened. Elena appeared in the doorway, her hair still damp from a shower, wearing one of the simple sweaters Susan had bought her. The color was pale blue, the same shade she used to wear when the world was still whole. For a moment she lingered by the doorway as if unsure whether she had the right to walk into the room. "Morning," Andrew said gently, setting aside the paper. She gave a small nod. "Morning," she echoed. Her voice was quiet but clearer than before, her eyes no longer as lost. Chloe looked up, her face brightening. "I saved you the last pancake," she announced, pointing at the plate. "It's a little burnt, but Dad says that's just extra flavor." Elena smiled, a soft, uncertain curve of her lips that felt like sunlight breaking through cloud. "Thank you," she said, sitting slowly. Her movements were still cautious, like someone learning the shape of her own body again. For a few minutes they ate in gentle silence. The clinking of forks, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the patter of rain beginning to tap against the window. Ordinary sounds. Yet none of this felt ordinary. Andrew watched her quietly, noticing how she paused now and then as if waiting for something to jolt loose in her mind. It came suddenly. The smell of coffee, the faint sweetness of syrup, something clicked. A flash of a morning long ago. Laughter. The sound of Chloe's giggle when she spilled milk across the table. The memory was so vivid it almost hurt. Her hand trembled as she set down her fork. "Are you all right?" Andrew asked softly. Elena nodded slowly, her eyes far away. I remembered her," she said quietly. "Chloe, when she was smaller. We were here at this same table. You were making coffee." The light came through the window and her voice cracked. "It's like it's still happening." Andrew's throat tightened, but he stayed calm. "That's good," he said, voice steady. "That's a good sign." Chloe had frozen, staring at her with wide eyes. "You remember me?" she asked, hope trembling in her voice. Elena turned toward her, eyes shining. "I think so," she whispered. "At least a part of you. You had peanut butter on your cheek that day." "You kept saying it was your warrior mark," Chloe gasped, covering her mouth in shock. "I did say that," she squealed, half laughing, half crying. The sound of her laughter filled the kitchen, spilling over like light. Andrew turned away for a moment, hiding the tears that burned behind his eyes. When Elena reached for Chloe's hand, it was hesitant at first, like testing fragile glass. But Chloe grasped it firmly, her small fingers warm and real. That simple contact sent another ripple through Elena, an echo of bedtime stories, small arms around her neck whispered goodnights. The memories came in flickers like photographs developing one by one. The rain outside began to fall harder, a steady rhythm against the windows. Elena's gaze shifted to the garden beyond the glass where droplets clung to the leaves of the old apple tree. She remembered hanging paper lanterns there once, their glow trembling in the summer air. She turned back to Andrew, eyes misted. "That tree," she said softly. "We used to sit under it on her birthday." He froze mid-breath. "Yes," he said. "You hung stars in the branches for her." Her lips parted. "Stars," she whispered. "I remember that word." She turned toward Chloe, her voice trembling. "Dream of the stars, my little one." The phrase fell into the room like a spell breaking. Chloe gasped, the pencil dropping from her hand. "You said it," she cried, tears springing to her eyes. "You said it again." Elena blinked, dazed, as though she didn't realize what she'd said. I?" Andrew's voice was thick but steady. "Every night," he said. "That was the last thing you told her before the accident." Elena covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking. The tears came quietly, running down her cheeks unchecked. Chloe climbed out of her chair and hugged her, wrapping her small arms tightly around her mother's waist. Andrew watched them, his hands trembling slightly, afraid to move or speak, afraid to shatter the fragile moment that had taken 2 years to arrive. Elena leaned down, pressing her forehead against Chloe's hair. "I remember the way you used to hold me," Chloe whispered. "Please don't forget again." "I won't," Elena said softly. "Not this time." Outside, the rain slowed to a soft drizzle. The gray light shifted, a faint glow breaking through the clouds. For the first time, Andrew let himself believe, really believe, that the woman sitting across from him wasn't just a ghost from his past. She was here, alive, remembering piece by piece. And though the road ahead still wound through fog and shadow, in that quiet kitchen, surround night wrapped itself around the house like a heavy coat, thick with the hum of distant rain and the quiet creak of settling wood. Andrew stood by the living room window, the reflection of city lights flickering across his face. The day had felt impossibly long, beautiful, terrifying, miraculous. Elena had remembered something real. For hours afterward, she drifted between silence and laughter, like someone relearning how to breathe. But as evening deepened, a new tension crept in. The fragile peace that had filled the house began to waver. Outside, headlights swept across the driveway, too slow to be random. Andrew's shoulders stiffened as the same black sedan from days earlier rolled by, pausing near the curb before sliding down the street again. He watched it disappear around the corner, unease crawling through his chest. He'd seen that car before, parked across from the alley. He'd told himself it was coincidence, but the longer it lingered, the less he believed it. He moved through the house quietly, checking locks, adjusting curtains. Upstairs, Chloe's laughter echoed faintly from her room. Elena was reading to her, the sound of their voices rising and falling in an easy rhythm. He paused at the foot of the stairs, listening. There was a moment, a heartbeat, where everything felt whole again. Then the phone on the table buzzed. He frowned, glancing at the screen. No caller ID. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Mr. Sloan," a man's voice said, low and smooth. "I hope I'm not calling too late." Andrew froze. "Who is this?" "Just a friend concerned for your safety," the voice continued. "You've been entertaining someone lately. A woman who calls herself Sarah." His heart lurched. "If you know something, you'd better say it." "She isn't who you think," the man interrupted, his tone calm, practiced. "She was involved in something before the crash. Something that doesn't concern you anymore. Let the past stay buried, Mr. Sloan, for your daughter's sake." The line went dead. Andrew stared at the phone, his pulse pounding. Anger flared hot, then fear. Whoever they were, they knew too much. He turned the phone over, considering his next move, when a shadow flickered past the window again, just for a second. He crossed the room in silence and peered through the blinds. But the street was empty now. He found himself standing outside Elena's door a few minutes later, knocking softly. She looked up when he entered, Chloe asleep against her shoulder, a storybook open in her lap. Her eyes were calmer tonight, clearer. "What's wrong?" she asked quietly, instantly sensing the change in his face. "Nothing," he lied too quickly. "Just wanted to check on you both." She studied him for a moment. "You're a terrible liar," she said softly. He almost smiled. Then his gaze drifted to the necklace resting on her collarbone, the starfish pendant they'd found days ago. It caught the light like something alive. "Do you remember where that came from?" he asked. She hesitated, fingers lifting to touch it. "A beach," she said slowly. "Cold wind. You and Chloe were there. But there's something inside it, isn't there?" He nodded. "A message," he said. "And proof." He told her about the micro SD card, about the name Harrow written inside, about what the investigator had begun to uncover. As he spoke, her expression changed. First confusion, then dread, then something darker. "I know that name," she whispered. Her voice trembled. "I saw it on papers before the crash. I was supposed to meet someone. I didn't tell you because I thought you'd be in danger if I did." Andrew's stomach sank. "You were trying to expose them." She looked down, tears slipping quietly across her cheek. "They were dumping chemical waste off the coast. I found the documents, the flight logs. I sent copies to a journalist, but..." Her hand shook as she touched her temple. "I think they found out." The memory seemed to hit her like a wave, images breaking through the fog. The helicopter, the sudden pressure drop, the explosion of light. "They sabotaged it," she whispered. "It wasn't an accident." Andrew's voice was barely a breath. "You remember that?" She nodded slowly, the truth solidifying inside her. They didn't mean to kill me. They wanted to silence me. A sound outside made them both jump, a faint metallic click near the back gate. Andrew's instincts flared. He moved to the window, peering into the darkness. Nothing but the shimmer of rain and the rustle of wet leaves. Still, he reached for the phone. "I'm calling the police." Elena caught his wrist. "Wait," she said urgently. "If they're watching, that'll only make them panic. Let me handle it. I remember the man who threatened me before the crash. He'll come again, but this time we won't hide." Andrew searched her face. There was strength there now, trembling but real. The woman who had survived the ocean was still inside her, clawing her way back. He nodded slowly. "All right," he said, "but you don't face this alone." Outside, the rain began again, harder this time, drumming against the windows like a warning. In the reflection of the glass, Elena's eyes met his, haunted, alive, and resolute. Somewhere beyond that darkness, the black sedan waited with its engine idling, and the storm that had started 2 years ago was finally finding its way back to shore. By warmth, cinnamon, and tears, it finally felt like morning again. The courthouse smelled faintly of rain and marble polish. Light from the tall windows spilled across the floor in long golden stripes, cutting through the gray of the morning. Elena stood just inside the entrance, her fingers wrapped tightly around the starfish pendant that hung against her throat. The world around her felt unreal. Cameras flashing, voices murmuring, the low hum of expectation that filled the air whenever truth was about to be dragged into the light. Andrew stood beside her, a calm strength radiating through the tension in his jaw. Chloe was with Susan somewhere in a safe room upstairs, far from the noise, far from the people who still whispered about the woman who had come back from the dead. She had not slept the night before. Her dreams had been a collision of memories, water swallowing metal, the smell of salt and smoke, the name Harrow written in a trembling hand. But there had also been other images, softer ones. Chloe's laughter, Andrew's voice telling her to breathe, the warmth of their home. It was those that kept her upright now. The prosecutor met them near the security gate, a man with tired eyes and a briefcase full of truths that had taken too long to be heard. "The board meeting logs are in," he said quietly. "Your statement ties perfectly to the financial trail we uncovered. They'll deny it, of course, but we've got signatures, including the one that ordered the containment." Elena's fingers tightened around the pendant. "Who signed it?" The prosecutor hesitated. "We'll let the evidence show that." When she entered the courtroom, the sound of murmuring reporters dimmed into a hush. Every eye turned toward her as if the act of remembering had made her something mythic. Harrow's lawyers sat in a neat line, expensive suits and colder eyes. At the far end of the table sat the man himself, silver hair slicked back, a smile carved from marble. He looked at her not like a ghost returned, but like a problem he'd expected to bury. The questioning began. Her voice wavered at first, but the rhythm of truth steadied it. She told them about the records she had found, the late-night phone calls, the threats disguised as warnings. She described the helicopter flight, the jolt in the air, the sudden plunge, and when she spoke of the faces of the others who had been with her, the pilot, the technician, the researcher, her voice broke, but she did not stop. Across the room, Andrew's eyes never left her. Every word she spoke was another piece of the woman he loved finding her way back to herself. Then came the moment the prosecutor had warned her about. The final exhibit, a decrypted folder from the micro SD card. It appeared on the large monitor, a series of documents labeled Reputational Risk Containment, Internal Approval. One by one, signatures appeared beneath the text. Board members, financial officers, and finally, one name none of them expected. The photo attached to the signature made the room shift. It wasn't Harrow's second-in-command, not the faceless contractor everyone had assumed. It was a man they all recognized, Marco, the cheerful waiter from Hanover Street, the one who had watched her every Sunday with easy smiles. The courtroom erupted in noise. Cameras flashed like lightning. Elena felt her knees weaken. Marco had been paid to track her movements before the crash, sending text updates to an unnamed consultant at Harrow Marine. He hadn't known the plane would fall from the sky, but his reports had given them her location and time of departure. The negligence, the sabotage, all of it had branched from that one simple act of betrayal. Andrew's expression hardened, grief and fury colliding in his chest. He remembered Marco's warm greetings, the wine recommendations, the jokes he'd told Chloe. The betrayal sliced deep. But deeper still was the relief. The puzzle finally whole, the ghosts given names. The judge's gavel cracked the air back into silence. Testimonies resumed. Harrow's lawyers floundered. The truth, once hidden beneath wealth and strategy, now glowed under fluorescent light for the world to see. When it was over, Elena walked out into the open air, with Andrew beside her. Reporters shouted her name. Microphones reached forward like spears, but she ignored them all. Rain had started again, fine and misting, soft against her face. They drove home in silence, the city a blur of wet glass and passing headlights. At the house, Chloe ran to meet them, barefoot on the porch, hair flying. "Did you tell them everything?" she asked breathlessly. Elena crouched down, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Everything," she said softly. "It's done now." They went to the backyard where the old apple tree stood, leaves glistening with rain. Lanterns hung from its branches again, faint light swaying in the breeze. Chloe climbed onto the swing and Elena stood beside her, one hand on the rope, one on her heart. Andrew joined them quietly, slipping his hand into hers. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was peace, the kind that comes when the truth has been spoken, when fear has nothing left to feed on. Elena looked up at the gray sky breaking open to reveal faint light, her voice barely a whisper. "Dream of the stars, my little one." Chloe smiled, swinging higher, laughter floating into the cool evening air. And for the first time since the crash, since the ocean and the fire and the loss, the sound didn't ache. It healed.